All right. Well, we are live, and I'm going to be talking about the fact that Jeff Bezos is stepping down as the CEO of Amazon. So he's had quite the career at Amazon. He's stepping down. I want to walk through that and just talk a little bit about my thoughts on the whole situation and how that's going to affect those of us who are sellers on the platform that he built, as well as some things that I think we can have as takeaways, at least some things I wrote down that I think are good takeaways. So I'm going to go through a few articles here that I wanted to share. So just if you're watching this, I'm doing this live, but if you're watching this in the future, feel free to drop in the comments, whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, and just let me know your thoughts. What have you learned from Jeff Bezos's time at Amazon, as well as, how do you think this is going to affect you? I think, honestly, I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. From a day-to-day perspective, I don't think it's going to have that much of a difference for us. So just to talk a little bit about some articles that I pulled up here. So, this is a couple weeks now, so it's not, new news, but I do think it is something to at least talk about. I've kind of been thinking through kind of my own thoughts of, where is this all going? So as we all know, Jeff Bezos has stepped down as the CEO. Although he's still going to be very active at Amazon. He's going to be the executive chairman of the board, which sounds like a pretty big position. So even though he's not as much in the day-to-day, come Q3, so it'll be later this year, he's still going to have a big effect on, a lot of the decisions made on Amazon, just less of the, day-to-day stuff. And so I've already seen folks starting to bring up things like, will the email address now be andy@amazon.com if Jeff is no longer there? So just interesting thought there. It can't be hurting him too much because even though it was a couple weeks ago that he made the announcement, but he has now overtaken Elon Musk as the richest person in the world again, which is funny because I didn't know that he was no longer the richest person in the world compared to Elon Musk, which I thought was kind of funny there. Now, he did put out this interesting letter to shareholders. I did put in the description down below. There is a link where you can read this letter, but it was a few interesting things stuck out to me. Like, for one, they have 1.3 million people that are employed by Amazon. I had no idea Amazon employed that many people. I was thinking maybe a couple 100,000 or something like that. So, he did talk about how he started this journey 27 years ago. I mean, the most I've ever had a job, the same job, was maybe 3 or 4 years in the same position. So it's interesting that he's been, founder and CEO for 27 years. I mean, if anything, just give the guy credit that it was time to move on. But he talks a little bit here about some of their accomplishments. I notably, for folks watching this, the marketplace is probably definitely one of his biggest accomplishments. It's interesting that Amazon, I think, is a pioneer, especially compared to a lot of other e-commerce companies with the marketplace. Where third-party sellers could come in and be able to offer their products and sell other people's products. And it's, created lots of businesses just in that world. So, kudos to him for thinking of that. Although, there's all these other interesting, some of these, I'm not even sure what they are. Like, it'd be interesting to see this just walkout shopping. I did shop at an Amazon store at my local mall. And I think if I did just that walkout shopping, I probably would have been arrested because you did have to still go to the counter. But I've heard about that they have the shopping in some certain stores where, like, I guess you probably have to be registered and whatnot. But you could just, whatever items you have, you don't even check out at a cashier. You just walk out and just charges your account. How that works, I don't fully understand. But, another thing he's got on here that's also notable is he calls it Prime's insanely fast shipping. I thought, that's definitely a good point. I mean, because when you think about it, Amazon Prime has definitely raised the game. I mean, I remember as a kid, pre-internet, you would see these ads on TV where you could buy something and they would say it would ship in 3-4 weeks. Or sometimes it would say, allow 4 to 6 weeks for shipping and handling. And if you got it in 2 weeks, you're excited because it didn't take that long. But now it's like, in some cases you could order a product, get it the next day or even the same day from Amazon. And that's something they would definitely have pioneered. And so they've really been on the forefront of a lot of that. So we had a few other initiatives that they've done, which I don't think are as relevant to us, but still, kudos to Amazon for coming up with that. And you can take a look at his letter there. And so just to kind of walk through, how does this going to affect us as sellers? Now, having worked at big companies myself, I know that who is the CEO can have a big impact long term on a company. From a day to day, it probably won't have that much of an impact. I don't think we'll see much of an impact in general of when he's gone. Like, I don't think we're going to see a lot of big decisions. One thing that was kind of interesting, just to show another article I saw here, and I don't know if this is somewhat of a hit piece, you could argue, but this is saying that Jeff Bezos was halfway out the door for Amazon for a while. I mean, it was written pretty much like the next day after he announced it. I thought it was kind of interesting that somebody would write an article like that. It's more just in my head, like, I guess it just kind of goes to show, like, he had created this big empire with 1.3 million employees, not 100,000 employees, 1.3 million. And so he had gotten to a point, like, he didn't need to be there in the day to day. And so, when it says he's halfway out the door, well, most people that have gotten to that level of success and, they've been in that same job for 27 years, probably aren't going to be as engaged as they were on day one. I know that's the philosophy he's used at Amazon a bit. It was the day one philosophy, that always be thinking about day one. And I think that segues into kind of my next portion I wanted to talk about here of, what are the things we can take away from Jeff Bezos? So, he is the richest man in the world, as I mentioned before, but a couple of things to, don't forget is his more humble beginnings. And I think we've probably all seen some of the memes where they talk about kind of before and after over the course of 20 years. Here he is in the 90s, here he is in the late, what was that, 2017, late teens, I guess we would call that. But like, he definitely had a very long-term focus. I mean, I think a lot of us have probably seen this picture. I use this sometimes. I've got some, images I use for motivation and whatnot. And you think about this for a moment. Here's this man who's become the richest man in the world. Nobody would look at this picture, especially in the 90s, and say, this guy is going to be the richest man in the world. If you had put money in a betting environment that this guy in this picture, with the wires exposed and the, spray painted sign on the wall that looks, I mean, it's hard to tell by the angle, but this looks crooked to me. Maybe it's just the angle, but just the fact that he went on to become the richest person in the world. And even if he wasn't the richest person in the world, just the fact that he built what he built, even if you said, what Amazon became in like 2004 was pretty incredible, especially when you compare it to, some of the competition of what else was going on during that dot-com bubble in the late 90s. You may remember some of the, Web 1.0 famous quote unquote failures, companies didn't quite work out, like pets.com, or, some of the other ones like, what was the other one? It was like GovWorks. It was a documentary about this company that was trying to solve different problems on the internet. And the problem that GovWorks was trying to solve was like giving government kind of an access to, people who could do whatever they need to do with the government, pay tickets, pay taxes, pay registrations, pay whatever online. That didn't quite work out. But, here's this guy who started selling books, made it work. And so he niched down his books. That was his niche into the internet, to the World Wide Web, as people were still calling it back then, was to sell books. And then it became the everything store. And so, many of us watching this, built a business around the marketplace that he created, which all started from, a guy trying to find his niche in the internet. and decided to go after books. And so, think about that lesson of that long-term focus. And if you go back, like I remember, some of the interviews he was in the media from like the early 2000s, and they're kind of hammering him like, is it even ethical that you're not running the company profitable? And he always had this long-term focus. He kind of knew where he was going, and he kept taking steps. And so, one of the things when you think about it is he thought very big. And so maybe he didn't know what the company was going to look like, with like Amazon Web Services. Maybe he had that in the back of his mind. Things like Alexa. I've seen interviews where people kind of come down on him about, the Fire Phone being this big failure, and he thought it actually was a success because they tried something. So he was willing to try things. And so I think that's another lesson, is be willing to try things and don't look at things as failures. And then one of the other lessons is, and this might be somewhat controversial to some folks, but the fact that well, let me take a step back. And I'm going to say my lesson here is to stay connected. Do what you can to stay connected to your customers and your core constituents. And so, as I mentioned before earlier at the beginning of this broadcast, was that he talked about how basically, you can email Jeff at, and so the joke is it's going to be Andy at Amazon.com. And so the fact that you can get in touch with him, or even if, back to the, he's been halfway out the door for a few years now, according to that one article, it doesn't matter. The fact you can go above the entry level, support is pretty incredible. Because think about it this, if you've been on Amazon for any length of time, you kind of develop this like love-hate relationship with the company, especially with the support. I'm sure we can all agree on that. Now, in Amazon's defense, if you look at especially a lot of the tech companies, there is no next level person to talk to. Some of them, there's not even a person to talk to. Amazon, at least, for a lot of types of tickets, you can put in your phone number and then your phone will start ringing instantly with somebody from Amazon calling you. Now, you never know what you're going to get sometimes with the person on the phone from seller support, but just the fact that, one, you can actually talk to a person, but then two, if you don't like the answers that you're getting, there's a chain of command, and you can email, even though originally it was you were emailing the CEO of the company, and now it's really more an executive team. It's kind of more, is my perception anyway, of who's seeing the Jeff at Amazon.com. I think it's pretty incredible that the company created it so you can go above people's heads, because in a lot of companies there's not cultures where you could go above whoever you're dealing with's head, and it's readily available, tech company or not. And like I said, a lot of tech companies, Facebook, there's no one to talk to. It's like you either have an account rep or go look in the forums or try to decipher what your question is based on their support articles, which are probably outdated because they're constantly making changes. Whereas Amazon, at least, whether or not you get the answer you want, you have someone to talk to. So you got to give them kudos for that. So I think that's another lesson, is staying connected. So kudos to Jeff for that. So I wish him well in whatever he's doing next. Hopefully we all wish him well. I'm sure there's probably, people that are, like the one CNN article about how he was already halfway out the door for a while. You know what? Give the guy credit. He built something pretty incredible with Amazon. Maybe it's become this monster, this beast at this point. But you know what? That was all started by a person who, again, he was trying to figure out his niche in the World Wide Web, the information superhighway, the internet thing back in the mid 90s that we didn't know what to call it yet. And he came up with, I'm going to sell books on the internet. And he ended up building one of the biggest companies in the world and becoming the richest man in the world. And something that, whether it was meant to be altruistic or not, many of us watching this have been able to create businesses around that. So I think that's pretty incredible. So again, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. And another thing I think is interesting is, he built something that's really all over the world. And so it's not just in the US that people are going on Amazon. There are people who are, in Canada, Europe, India, well, not in China anymore, but, in Japan and now Singapore, the UAE, Australia. I mean, it keeps growing, all the countries where Amazon has customers, where Amazon has locations. And so one of the incredible things, going back to, the marketplace, is one of the things that was, as he even said in his letter, one of the things he's proud of is the fact that we can create a business using Amazon's platform, not just here in the US, but also we can branch it out into other marketplaces. And so I've had a lot of success going into other marketplaces. It's still, Amazon.com is still the biggest sales driver in my business, but just the fact that we can go into other countries and already have a platform, already have a presence we can go into, that I think is actually easier than trying to go into a lot of other non-Amazon marketplaces. Because if you already understand how things work on Amazon.com, oversimplifying it here a bit, but to go into some place like Canada or the UK or wherever the case is, really the money symbol is different. So the way Amazon Seller Central operates is pretty much the same. Now, the hard part is jumping through those hoops. And so recently I put together a workshop where I helped people get into Canada, and the people that attended, I got a lot of great feedback from it. So if you are thinking about, potentially expanding into some of the marketplaces outside of the US, I would definitely say Canada is one of those ones to consider. And because I had such good feedback from the first workshop I did, I'm actually going to be hosting another workshop soon, where we're going to walk through how to get started. We're going to walk through the registrations and all that. I haven't picked the date yet, but if that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go to maximizingecommerce.com/fast, as in FAST, and you can get on the waiting list. And so the folks that get on the waiting list will have the ability to be one of the first people to sign up, and also have special pricing. That's the way I did it in the past with the last one I did, where people got special pricing that only the folks who signed up for the wait list got. And then when I made it more public, the price did go up. So if that's something you're thinking about, I will make a fairly bold claim, depending on your product and your sales, the return on investment of this workshop could be one of the best investments you'll make all year. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, again, just head on over to maximizingecommerce.com/fast. And I do have a link in the description as well, both on Facebook and YouTube, depending on where you were watching this. And so I wish you the best. And again, I'd love to know down below, what are your thoughts on Jeff Bezos's time at Amazon? What have you learned from the man? I mean, it could be good or bad. I went with some positive things, but you could say there were some things that you could have thought, could have been done differently, or whatever the case is. And then, how do you think this is going to affect you and or other Amazon sellers? So if you found this to be helpful, please consider liking this video as well as subscribing to this channel. And I wish you the best in your e-commerce journey. Take care.